and Roman.
Chloe will...
With all the latest from around the world and here at home now, it's the ITV News.
My dear Papa, Prince Charles paid tribute tonight to the father he has lost.
My dear Papa was a very special person who, I think above all else, would have been amazed by the reaction and the touching things that have been said about him.
Also on the programme, the funeral will be in Windsor on Saturday. The Prince's coffin transported in a Land Rover he helped design. The Prince and the people, the stories behind the floral tributes. Harry heads home from LA without Meghan, but may only just clear quarantine in time. Now it's 88 police officers injured as Northern Ireland braces for another night of violence. Writing herself into the record books, Rachel Blackmore becomes the first female jockey to win the Grand National.
I don't feel male, female right now. I don't even feel human. This is just unbelievable.
Life on the ocean waves. Two former officers on Britannia remember the Duke as a man of the sea.
This is ITV News with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. After all the tributes from the heads of state and 41 gun salutes, we were reminded tonight that royalty offers no protection against grief. Prince Philip's family are, like any bereaved family, feeling his loss deeply. Prince Charles talked of his dear papa, as he called him, describing him as a very special person. And he spoke for the whole family when he said they were missing him enormously. It fell to the Queen's daughter-in-law, Sophie Wessex, to say how she's been coping. The Queen has been amazing, she said. Prince Philip's funeral will be next Saturday afternoon at Windsor. For COVID restriction reasons, it will be inevitably a small family service, as perhaps he might have liked anyway. Certainly, he will leave his imprint on proceedings, as Chris will explain. His body will be driven through the castle grounds into St George's Chapel on a Land Rover that the Prince himself helped to design.
He'd lost his father just a day ago, but this evening at Highgrove in Gloucestershire, some personal words of reflection from Prince Philip's eldest son.
I particularly wanted to say that my father, I suppose the last 70 years, has given the most remarkable, devoted service to the Queen, to my family, and to the country, and also to the whole of the Commonwealth. And as you can imagine, my family and I miss my father enormously. He was a much-loved and appreciated figure. And apart from anything else, I can imagine, and we're so deeply touched by the number of other people here and elsewhere around the world in the Commonwealth who also, I think, share our loss and our sorrow. And my dear papa was a very special person who, I think, above all else, would have been amazed by the reaction and the touching things that have been said about him. And from that point of view, we are, my family, deeply grateful for all that. It will sustain us in this particular loss and at this particularly sad time. Thank you.
Such a public tribute at a time of such private grief cannot have been easy. Much has been written about the ups and downs of the relationship between Prince Charles and his father. But his words tonight of his dear papa were delivered from the heart on behalf of the whole family. Fittingly, for a former Navy man, today's death gun salute included rounds fired at sea. This was HMS Montrose off the coast of Oman in the Arabian Sea, and this HMS Diamond in the English Channel, as well as locations on land. At Woolwich Barracks in London, the 41 rounds came from the same guns which had fired in 1947 on the day of Prince Philip's wedding to Princess Elizabeth. At all the locations today, the personnel had been given less than 24 hours' notice.
I would say probably 50% of the soldiers were on leave from all over the country, all the way up in Scotland. So when the call goes out, everyone to head back. So it was, get back as soon as you can.
Be they soldiers, sailors or airmen and women, Britain's military wanted to honour a man who had served in the Royal Navy and fought at sea in the Second World War. And someone who might have gone to the very top of the Navy had his wife not acceded to the throne at such a young age. At Edinburgh Castle, overlooking the beautiful Scottish capital from which the Duke took his title, the order to fire was given by an army reservist who, in her day job, works in the NHS.
It's a big moment, it's a sad moment, feeling for the royal family. It's a member of their family that they've lost, but yeah, proud to be a part of the moment.
At Windsor Castle today, members of the Household Cavalry lined up outside to pay their respects to the Duke of Edinburgh. Inside, the Queen signed off the much revised plans for her husband's funeral, which will take place in a week's time. The Queen's visitors today included her children. Prince Edward drove out with his wife Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, who thanked the people who were asking after the Queen. You can just make out how she replied, "The Queen has been amazing." The Queen's only daughter, Princess Anne, was also seen driving away this evening. The family and their staff now have 7 days to prepare for Prince Philip's funeral. Chris Ship, ITV News.
Well, let's join Romilly, who is outside Windsor Castle tonight. Romilly, we've obviously been told quite a lot about the arrangements for the Duke's funeral today. What more can you tell us?
Well, Tom, the Queen in her grief, like so many in the country who've lost loved ones this awful year, is having to make adjustments to plans. The funeral will be scaled back. We know already that the Prime Minister won't be attending so that more members of the Duke's family can, but the palace has confirmed that Prince Harry will be here. And as you say, the funeral will be on Saturday at 3 p.m. inside St George's Chapel within the walls of Windsor Castle behind me here. Until then, the Duke's body will lie and rest in the private chapel in Windsor Castle. On Saturday, the coffin will be moved the short distance in a unique Land Rover that, rather amazingly, the Duke had a hand in designing, and the royal family will walk behind it down the hill to the chapel. The guest list can be no more than 30, which rules out almost everyone apart from family, and the Duke will be interred in the royal vault beneath the chapel. So a funeral that will be televised but won't allow any public involvement, which will be difficult for the many who'd like to pay their respects to the Duke, but won't be so far from what the man who hated fuss himself wanted.
OK, Romilly, thank you very much indeed. OK, well, in a lifetime of meeting people, Prince Philip clocked up 22,000 solo engagements. And no wonder, really, he was patron of 800 charities. Today, some of those people whose lives he touched have been placing flowers by royal gates or posting tributes online. And as Paul explains, they have been remembering what he meant to them.
After a life of such service, so many today wanted to do their bit too. At Buckingham Palace, the Duke's 99 years were marked even by those who've seen fairly few.
We thought it was important for this little one as well, that we can share this moment with her and tell her when she's older who he was and how he was. Brilliant.
Why did you feel it was important to come all the way from Manchester today?
I was devastated when I heard the news yesterday. It's so sad that we've lost somebody very important to the whole world.
I work at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. The first time I seen him, he opened a planetarium. Sometimes he comes to the museum without any bodyguards. He kind of dressed on the cover.
We're from New Zealand, but he's been a great man for the Commonwealth, and we just felt that we really wanted to come down here and pay our respects.
At Sandringham, at times there were tears with the tributes. For others, great pride in the public service they'd shared with the Duke.
I used to be the standard bearer for the Royal British Legion, and we've attended the Duke and the Queen up here at Sandringham at the church. He always had a good word to say to you, and he always docked his hat when he saw us driving around the estate. Good memory out of the thousands of people he must meet.
People have been queuing all day here at Buckingham Palace to pay their respects to the Duke of Edinburgh. They've actually been asked not to gather at royal residences, but many have come, despite the pandemic, to mark the long service of the Duke through so many other extraordinary times for this nation. Thousands have followed the advice to pay tribute online instead via a virtual book of condolence on the royal website, which states that a selection of messages will be passed on to members of the family. Others have been sharing their photos of meeting the Duke on social media, a life which changed many others, including John's, who completed the Duke of Edinburgh Award in prison, his path to becoming a chef.
I was so young at the time. I was still a child when I went into the prison, so it almost just gave me a template. It built up my confidence, my self-esteem. It was an achievement. So I felt like I'd achieved something when I left the prison. So I think how you feel about yourself is such a major part in everything that you do. My thank you comes from, what I can give back to society now.
And in paying tribute to the Duke's duty, many today feel they have done theirs too. Paul Brand, ITV News.
Now the plans for the Prince's funeral are out. Time is ticking down for Prince Harry to get himself on a flight to London because, like everyone else, he will need to quarantine for a minimum of 5 days after he arrives here from California. Emma is in Santa Barbara. Emma, good evening. He's going to have to get a move on, isn't he?
Yes, indeed. We understand that Prince Harry is home in the hills here in Santa Barbara, preparing for that very difficult journey to the UK. He has been now COVID tested, and assuming that that is a clear result, he will be able to board a flight to the UK. But of course, he will have to arrive in the UK and go into quarantine. The rules are that it needs to be 10 days, but you are allowed to test after 5, and a clear test allows you to then be released to mix with others. So I guess the hope is that by Friday at the latest, he will be able to have been tested, get his result, and be allowed then to meet with other members of his family. And what a difficult time that will be, because of course, as they all cope with their own grief, they are also dealing with the fallout of that interview that was done by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex with Oprah Winfrey here just a couple of weeks ago. And this will be the first time that the family have actually met face to face since those very difficult allegations were made about potential racism within the family and Meghan feeling utterly excluded and let down. So there will no doubt be such a lot for them to deal with, not only having to cope with the loss that they're dealing with at the moment, but also answering some of the questions that have been raised by that interview and the conduct of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
OK, Emma, thank you very much indeed. Well, Chris joins me, of course, in the studio here. Can I just talk about the Prince Charles's tribute tonight? I always think it's a bit of a misnomer that just because someone's reached a great age and they led a very full life, as the Duke indisputably did, that it necessarily does anything to lessen the grief when someone goes.
Yeah, I think you make a really valid point, actually. 99 years of age, just a couple of months off his 100th, doesn't mean to say that this is, any easier to bear for the family. I think that was quite evident from Prince Charles tonight, who gave a very sort of moving tribute to, his dear papa, as he referred to him. And it was done on behalf of the whole family. And I think, as I said at the very top, it's actually, I don't think we sometimes acknowledge quite how difficult it must be trying to sort of live this very sort of private grief in the public sphere. And, as the days count down to the funeral, that's going to be very difficult for all the Queen's children, I think, many of whom, all of whom actually have now been in to see her at Windsor Castle. So, yes, a lot's been written about how Prince Charles and his father were very different characters, but this family's just lost this sort of patriarchal figure, the man who did a lot of the parenting because the Queen was being Queen in the early years as well. So, yeah, let's not underestimate quite how difficult this is for all of them.
Now, Romilly's obviously given us a lot of the practical details of the funeral. What have you kind of made of the detail of it in particular?
Well, listen, I think what's important to point out is that this is not a state funeral. We knew he wouldn't get a state funeral, but they kept referring to these are the Duke's personal wishes. And despite having to make what they called significant adaptations because of COVID and all the rest of it, this is what he wanted to happen. All the way down to this unique Land Rover that's been built especially to carry his coffin from the staterooms at the top of Windsor Castle down the hill to St George's Chapel, as it will at precisely 14:45 hours on Saturday. I think it's going to be quite a sight.
OK. Chris, thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to some of the day's other news now. In the calendar of Northern Irish history, today is the 23rd anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday Peace Agreement. The goodwill it engendered after decades of bitter conflict seems a little more in peril tonight after a week of violence that has had uncomfortable echoes of times we all thought long past. Overnight, 14 more police officers were injured. That is 88 now. So from Belfast, here's Rohit.
Last night, once again, the police came under attack. We watched as violence erupted in the loyalist area of North Belfast. It was sporadic but sustained. Bottles and masonry hurled before other weapons were used. Look to the distance, a car torched, then pushed into a police line. The same pattern, more missiles, petrol bombs, fireworks, and some of these protesters, some of these rioters are perhaps no older than 14 or maybe 15 years old. 3 14-year-olds were arrested, and as well as the young, the very young were caught up in the disorder. And it continued a few streets away in a nationalist community where more missiles were thrown. A crowd gathered to watch. For some people here, this was just Friday night theatre. 14 police officers were injured in this area last night. 88 in total now over the past 8 nights. Today's the 23rd anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Some unionists say alongside the post-Brexit trading rules, it is one of the causes of this new violence.
It was sold to the unionist community as a settlement, and plainly it was never a settlement. So I think the Belfast Agreement for me is nothing to celebrate, and actually I think the root of some of the problems we're seeing today was actually sown at the time of the Belfast Agreement, which actually created the process which has led to all of these problems.
Those same streets where there was so much disorder are much quieter so far this evening. There are different explanations of what happened last night and of what happens next. Rohit Katru, ITV News, Belfast.
OK, to the latest on the vaccination programme, and a new record has been set in the past 24 hours. More people had a second dose of the vaccine yesterday than on any other day. The figure was more than 450,000, according to the latest government data. The number of deaths after positive tests for the virus was 40. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, in China, the world's biggest online business, Alibaba, has been fined £2 billion by the authorities there for abusing its hold over the Chinese market. The Chinese are worried about tech companies expanding into finance and health and other sensitive areas. And one of the most enduring stars of Big Brother, Nikki Graham, has died at the age of 38. She checked herself into a private hospital last month for treatment for an eating disorder. Her career in reality television began on the show in 2006. Its former host, Davina McCall, said she really was the funniest, most bubbly, sweetest girl. The history of the Grand National is, of course, a long one. It's been going for more than 180 years. It's never been won by a female jockey. But this afternoon, Rachel Blackmore changed all that. She became the first to clear that particular hurdle in women's sport, riding the favourite Minella Times to victory. In some ways, the race already had her name on it. She'd won, of course, the champion hurdle at Cheltenham less than a month ago. Understandably excited, she said she didn't feel male or female. I don't even feel human, she said. It's just unbelievable.
There was already a unique feeling about Aintree, no crowds and a sombre start as racing's big day began with a moment's reflection for Prince Phillip. At its very best, sport can be uplifting.
They're off and racing then for the Randox Grand National of 2021.
What was already a memorable day was about to become unforgettable.
On the right-hand side, Minella Times for Rachel Blackmore.
The world's best-known horse race, the Grand National, has been running since 1839, but has never been won by a female jockey, until today.
5 legs down.
After more than 4 punishing miles, conquering 16 brutal fences along the way, Rachel Blackmore guided Minella Times into steeplechasing history.
Minella Times, Rachel Blackmore raises the bar still higher.
You are the first female to win the world's most famous horse race. Such a tricky race to win. Well done.
Oh, thank you. I don't feel male, female right now. I don't even feel human. This is just unbelievable. I just cannot believe it. He was an absolutely sensational spin. My God, I just can't believe we're after winning the Grand National.
Rachel Blackmore has never been far from a horse and was jumping fences in Ireland from an early age. Her mum, who usually can't bear to watch Rachel race, made an exception today.
After she jumped the last, I said, oh my goodness, she probably could do it. So there was a little bit of shouting in Tipperary. I'm sure you heard us over there. So yeah, we're delighted. We're absolutely delighted. But it is actually, you know when people say something is unreal, this is unreal.
After the past year, today's result is just what racing needed. History made by a new superstar and a success that should inspire anyone who watched it happen. Steve Scott, ITV News.
A little bit of shouting in Tipperary has to be the understatement of the year. What a great story. Now, it would be a huge surprise if Manchester City fell at the final fence in the race for... Finally, the gun salute we saw at the start of the programme didn't just honour the life of Prince Philip and his links with the Royal Navy. It brought back memories for those who served on a particular ship, the Royal Yacht Britannia. It was where one former captain told Dan Rivers the Prince had felt at his most relaxed.
At the Royal Navy's oldest base, the senior service was determined to give the Duke the send-off he deserved. Among those here today were two former captains of the Royal Yacht Britannia, a vessel which held a special place in the affections of the Queen and Duke. Today they were reunited on the spot where in 1997 they and the royal family watched Britannia being decommissioned. The Queen appearing to blink away a tear as she and the Duke said goodbye to their floating home.
Here in Portsmouth it's very special because, of course, you know, this was the senior naval base. Where we're standing at the moment was where Britannia was decommissioned, and the memories are so special for us all to remember such a wonderful man today.
Both men got to know the Duke and Queen well on cruises of the Western Isles. It was a refuge for the royal family from the demands of duty.
Prince Philip wrote in his thing, it was the only place they could relax. And they did, actually, and seeing them relax was wonderful.
The Duke and Queen conducted hundreds of official engagements aboard Britannia, some solemn, many convivial. The Duke alone travelled more than 70,000 miles on the ship, twice circumnavigating the globe. But it was the family holidays where he could truly be himself and even cook for the family.
On one occasion I seem to remember making spaghetti out of salt water, but didn't go down that well.
The Royal Yacht Britannia took the Duke way down south.
In 1956, the Duke embarked on a world tour alone on the yacht, going as far as Antarctica. He and the crew even taking part in a beard-growing competition. Their respect for his wartime service, his no-nonsense attitude and seamanship was clear.
He said what ought to be done. He did what he said he was going to do, and he went on doing it, and he set a marvellous example.
The Navy shaped the character of the Duke. Today it said goodbye to its Lord High Admiral, a man who was its champion. Dan Rivers, ITV News, Portsmouth.
Seawater spaghetti, not sure it'll catch on. That's it. Good night. Thanks for watching.